Okay, we are live. We are live.
Sure, thanks, Rohit.
This will have to be on speaker view, right, Soumya?
Yes.
Okay. And you can see my screen right
Yes.
now. Only the presentation you can see, no?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Guys, there's some construction going on close by. Is it too loud or it's fine?
It's fine. As of now, we can't hear much.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Okay, now can you just see if it's changing? I mean, I put it on speaker view.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to make it speaker view.
So what you do is, Rohit, right now still retain the opening slide, and you can get off the slide once we start talking. Yeah, thanks. Hi, Prashant. You're on mute, Prashant.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Great.
Is it fine? Can you hear me well?
Yes, and we can see you well as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're live on YouTube, Prashant, so we will start sharp at 5. I just want to ensure none of you are on 2 devices, because then it will create an echo. If it's
no, I'm not.
Okay, fine. And the attendees are on the side, so you can see that.
Hi, Soumya. How are you?
Hi, Prashant. How are you?
Good to be on this session with you.
I know. I mean, it's quite an honor. I was just telling Anupam and Soumya, I'm going to be more of a student because I have no idea what Prashant is going to talk about.
No, come on. I mean, you actually live the regulatory and political world. We are just outside participants.
Yo, now you get bari kasato rao with said. That's how glamour it is on the ground. Glamorous. Anyway, jokes apart, it's quite exciting to be on this. Thanks to Takshashila as well.
Thank you, yeah.
Sorry, I'm just not on video yet because
No.
yeah, there's some construction going on my neighbor, and so I'm just trying to find a spot which is less noisy in the house. Nagis?
Hi, it's 5 o'clock and it's time to begin the session. A warm welcome to everyone, and being here on a Saturday evening means a lot. So I'm really happy that so many of you are on this as participants. So welcome to you all to this Takshashila conversation. The Takshashila Institution is a network think tank and a school of public policy. Physically, we are located in Bangalore, but have been operating around the world since 2010 over the internet. As an independent, non-partisan policy research think tank, we are engaged with India's relationship with the world, transforming how India is governed and exploring the intersection of technology, economics, and politics. Please take a look at our public policy education programs. They are pretty much tailored for people, especially like you. And we are all online and you can take them from anywhere. I think pretty much all programs today, meet this criteria. We have both short one semester certificate programs as well as we run graduate programs across the year. We have specializations in public policy, defense and foreign affairs, technology and policy. And recent offering has been biotech and policy. So, admissions are open through the year, so you could apply at any time. And do connect with us and subscribe on our newsletters and podcasts. And depending on your interest, we deliver sharp and timely analysis that allow you to reduce information overload and get to the heart of the matter. So this is about Takshashila. But coming to today's career webinar, this has been something that we've aspired to do for a couple of years now. And we said, while all our alumni and people who engage with us say, okay, we all study public policy and we are intrigued by it, but where do we head after that? We said this is a great opportunity to bring people who are subject matter experts, people who are doing diverse things to come and share, what's on the offering, as well as, a platform for you to engage, ask questions, and see what are the opportunities that lie ahead for all the curiosity. And it's also about navigating through different careers, because public policy, I think people have a very fixed mindset of thinking that it can have only this limitation of saying, okay, you can be a government affairs, corporate affairs person, but I would say it's beyond all of that. So this evening we have Prashant Prakash and Soumya Reddy, and Anupam will take us through this conversation. Over to you all.
Thanks, Soumya. Thanks for the introduction. And I think, yeah, seriously, thanks to everyone else who's joined in on a Saturday evening. I guess the fact that restaurants and pubs are not fully open helps us on that count. So if not, I think we would have found it very difficult to get so many people in at this time. So I thought this is the way we'd structure this particular conversation. we have, of course, two eminent people in their domains, and it's just that the domains are different. And for us, we're trying to be a little bit greedy here and try to get two great people in one particular session. So I thought I'll start with Prashant, who I'll give a better introduction later, but who's probably the master of the domain in the tech field. And we'll go through a conversation with Prashant, and then I'll switch over to Soumya, who's of course an elected representative of the people. So that's, I thought, how we structure it. So let's start with Prashant Prakash. I'm going to do the standard thing that people do in these things and read out a bio, but I'm going to ask him interesting questions later. So Prashant began investing in the Indian technology startup in about 2004, which was definitely well before they acquired global attention. He started his investing career as a co-founder of Erasmic, one of India's early stage funds. Prior to that, he founded two enterprises in the internet and multimedia publishing domains. He joined Axel in 2008, and I think as a key member of Axel's India team, Prashant focuses on consumer internet services and online marketplaces, many of which we are all very, very familiar with. He has led investments in AgroStar, Book My Show, Fab Hotels, Glow Road, Holiday Me, Inframarket, PropTiger, Rent Mojo, T-Box, and many other early stage companies. Prashant is, of course, from Bangalore and holds a master's degree in computer science from the University of Delaware and an undergraduate degree in computer science. So that's the formal bio. But Prashant, something tells me that this only captures a small and tiny percentage of all the exciting and fascinating things that you do. So I'm going to ask you to first start off this conversation by telling us something that's not in the bio. What are the other things that you do? And yeah, I'm going to start with that.
Yeah. So, I think, like you said, there's the Axel part of my world, which is about working with startups. And I think it's about 6-7 years ago, I got interested in the world outside of just the pure technology domain. And I think that's where kind of public policy fits in, right? It's just not technology. It's technology. There's a certain amount of, the world outside, which is both political, social, and so on. So in the social world, I work as the chairman of United Way here in Bangalore. And United Way is an organization that helps, bring communities, the power of communities to make social change, right? So that's the kind of area that we work in. And the area that we have made a significant difference in Bangalore is in the area of regenerating the lakes. We have something called the Wake the Lake program, and we have worked a little bit with Takshashila also on that program. So we have, out of the 200 odd lakes, we have made an influence for about 35 to 40 lakes in the city. So a long way to go. But I think and that's one area where we have worked very closely with the BBMP. So so give me a lot of exposure to how do you kind of work a tripartite relationship between the community, the corporate donors and sponsors, and the BBMP, which is the government in this case. So all these stakeholders really need to come together to make a lake a public space that works for everybody, right? And there's a couple other areas that United Way works in, but I'll keep that for another day.
Yeah.
The other social organization that I've been involved in is called Shikshana. Shikshana helps government schools in one key area which has not been addressed previously, largely in the country, not only in India, which is child motivation. So there's a lot of work that happens in government schools around the midday meal scheme. There's a lot of work around quality of education. But I think everybody loses the plot that unless the child is motivated, none of these make a difference. So we started with 10 schools in Kanakpura. And over the last 10 to 12 years, now we've been able to take it to all 40,000 plus schools in the state. So the program is called Prerna. And Prerna is now a state-adopted child motivation project, which is there in all HPS schools across the state. So that gave me a lot of experience on working through a policy from what I would call as an incubator stage, which is 10, 100 schools. And then when you need to scale any of these, you need to take it to the government. And that's the acceleration phase. So that is now my standard learning, the incubation, acceleration, process is something that you kind of work with the government. And more recently, I've been sorry, somebody is ringing the bell, so somebody will get it. Sorry. So more recently, I've been helping the IT and BT department kind of transform a lot of their initiatives, and I'm the chairman of the vision group for startups, and startups are what define the city and will kind of shape the state. So I've worked closely with the government, with a very eminent set of startup founders, and that's helping me kind of work on key initiatives and key policies that will change innovation or accelerate innovation. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but 50 to 60% of the GDP of the state is influenced in some shape or form by technology. Right. And it probably is going to go to 65%. So if as a state, we need to grow and need to maintain 65% of contribution from technology, and while others areas like agriculture and so on also start to make a difference at the intersection of technology and agriculture and so on, there's a real need to bring together all these different aspects of innovation, whether it's agri innovation, so social innovation, fintech-based innovation, space and future high-tech innovation. All of these need to come together in some hub kind of a fashion, and that's kind of one of the areas I'm working with the state government. Yeah.
I think with just those two projects, for example, the Prerna and what you were speaking about, United Way and the lake rejuvenation, that I think warrants an entire discussion on its own, because I've seen the report. Of course, we worked on this together. So the entire lake rejuvenation project is fascinating. So if anyone is interested, I think it's also publicly available. You should read about it as a model, which can be, I think, adopted in any other city in the country. And later, I also want to, get into also, thinking about what are the kind of opportunities of working with the government as an outsider. And so some of the things that you touched upon. So we'll get to that later. I thought let's start with your main domain, your forte, which is the technology startups. So I think one of the things that we have heard stories of quite often is the kind of regulatory challenges that startups face, and these are obviously different according to the different sectors that they are in. But one of the common themes that come out is one is finding the source of funding and so on, which they somehow do, but then they reach up to regulatory bottlenecks, right? And then navigating through that maze is quite difficult. I think a lot of them find it extremely difficult. And if I can try to put a positive spin on it, and therefore, because that is difficult, they're also hiring policy professionals and so on. So can you first start off by talking about what are the big kind of challenges, regulatory challenges that these startups face? Because you've also invested in a lot of them. Not you personally, but you've led the investment in a lot of them.
Yeah, I think I can pretty much say that if there is no regulatory challenge, there is no innovation.
Right.
I'll go that far, right?
Right.
So if it's about, I think policy makers need to, or the public policy folks need to understand that it's the fact that things are changing and are going away from the status quo and being defined by new behaviors, social behaviors, and are being defined by new demographic changes that happen, and more importantly, very different habits that are being either being driven by a whole new generation of consumers, or in many cases a whole different set of needs that people may kind of chance upon or end up having, right? So all these define opportunities for startups, right? And all of them today will in some shape or form be governed by laws which are a minimum of 50 years old, right? Now, how does a startup, there's two things that we could. So we were fortunate. We are fortunate that Sachin and Binny worked with us, and we were the first investors in Flipkart, right? So, and it's never easy, right? So when you start out with a company that's selling products online, there will be no laws in this country at that point in time to say that one can actually sell a product online. So what? How do? So it's funny that even till today nobody knows whose domain e-commerce lies in. Is it in the technology domain? Is it in the commerce ministry? Is it in the telecom ministry? It's still, all these really take decades. I mean, by the way, I mean, e-commerce is the entire generation of tech startups which are kind of innovating and changing are just 10 years old. It's that nascent. Our entire tech industry is 10 to 11 years old. So so there's a lot that needs to get redefined and reworked, and this requires a lot of engagement, a positive, non-confrontational engagement between companies and the government, which is a great opportunity for public policy folks. And I think it's early days. I think initially, like many technology entrepreneurs, they think they understand everything, and they will want to engage with the government themselves, and they'll realize that, they're probably not good at that, and they need to hire folks who are specialists and who can actually do that well, and who have the right context of the social domain, the political domain, and the economic domain, and in many cases also a good awareness of the technology domain, right? Yeah. Only when somebody has all these dimensions is when they'll be able to engage with the government. And the positive aspect is the government is also now understood that they cannot change any of these laws or make these modifications internally. They can attend these conferences, which gives them awareness and gets all of them educated on what's happening. But unless they engage with somebody who is in the trenches and solutioning that change, which is what startups are in the business of, to solution change, they will not be able to be practical about the laws they enact. So they are very, very cognizant that the government needs to proactively engage. And we can talk later that how they're starting to work with both the organizations and also form partnerships in some cases. And Karnataka, I've got to say, is a leader. One of the great things about Karnataka is how closely the public sector and the private sector work together. I think we lead any state. Most states will kind of model some of their engagement policies around how this partnership works in the state. So I'm starting to see a lot of that in the state, and I'm hoping that a lot of that will be carried. So net, I think there are a lot of areas in technology. Now, just talking about few areas, payments is a big space. E-commerce is now 10 years old and is still evolving. There's new forms of e-commerce such as e-pharmacy, which are still gray areas and still being still being figured out. There is the whole education MOOCs space, and you know the controversy that's happening in Karnataka about banning online education for certain classes. So all of these are areas that need to, the digital transformation in some of these areas, unfortunately, is far outpacing the ability of the current governmental policies and systems. So I can go on and on in terms of the number of areas, but like I said, there is no startup, there is no social innovation and change if these don't go in hand in hand.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating thing that you brought out, that there's no clear demarcation as to which department will look at some of these things. I mean, we've seen how that plays out with whatever, a cab aggregator thing. Is it transport department? Is it traffic police who will set rules? And then there's someone else who will set the rules, and telecom ministry, etc., or food delivery. All of these have the same set of problems. By the way, I think one of our PGP students was actually trying to deal with this and saying, how should you set up rules? But I don't think we got a very clear answer. on some of these things. But I think that's what, as you said, all of these opportunities also present, all of these challenges also present opportunities. So I think we've seen that many of these startups have, right away started investing in building policy teams. Hiring professionals for doing some of these things, and traditionally what was considered a very dirty word in India, which is lobbying, is now being seen as more acceptable thing, that you have to lobby not in terms of some of the the evil underhanded ways, but actually making a representation of what your needs and demands are to the government. And so I think increasingly you're seeing, even very young startups are hiring professionals to do some of these things and anticipate some of the changes, because you could take a bike rental company which is started, and then before you know it, the government can just come and ban it. So you have to be proactive in many of these cases. So can you tell us or give us a sense about the kind of people they're hiring? Is that really widespread, or is it my misconception? Are people really hiring a lot of professionals, etc.?
Yeah, so just there's one other aspect that's happening in Karnataka that's it's worth talking about, which is the Karnataka Innovation Authority that was just set up, right? Which is a sandbox.
Yeah.
So and so that's just got enacted, and hopefully that will make it easy for a startup to, for a period of a year or 2 years, work with immunity of any current law and experiment enough, and hopefully. Because it's about proving to the authorities and getting enough social validation that this is a useful service, and the community at large will benefit from this particular service, which is what a sandbox will like. So that's a good positive development. So there's like a staging of the innovation before it goes into law. Now, coming back to what you're saying, I don't want to set the wrong expectation that people are hiring these policy people in hundreds. No, it's very early days. But like I mentioned, there's two good things. One, most of the policy folks that I've seen hired into startups get to work directly with the CEO's office. Right. So in a sense, you get to really, in a very empowered fashion, create impact in the company. So my sense is that as more and more of these policy folks actually create that impact, it'll create a virtuous positive cycle, because these CEOs will talk to other CEOs and say, hey, you know what, you better hire one before you get on the wrong side of any law or get perceived as breaking anything, right, in the system. So I think it's the first generation of these folks, and I know a few guys like Joy Banderkar, Joy was part of Flipkart in the very early days. So I think a lot of these, and now he's part of Udaan. So there's definitely one generation of them who have made a positive impact. And my sense is that this will encourage more and more startups to hire them. But it's not just in startups, like I said. So we'll talk about some of the other areas. But in startups and in technology companies, I can tell you that there'll be more people hired. But in what time frame and in how many numbers, I guess we'll have to tell. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's early days. I mean, and probably that's what also partly makes it exciting. That it's an evolving landscape.
Right.
It's a dynamic landscape. So that for us, especially, I mean, you can imagine as Takshila, it's a very exciting space for us to just watch and observe and see how everything pans out and so on. But we spoke about individual kind of companies who are trying to get changes in the government and make policy recommendations which will help them, which will not just help individual companies but the entire that industry to grow. But I think probably it's a lot more effective when it comes from an industry body. So as against a startup trying to lobby with the government, sometimes it's a lot more effective when, let's say, NASSCOM does it. And NASSCOM has been, I mean, that's one of its primary kind of roles, which is to engage with the government in a meaningful way and bring about policy changes that will help the entire industry out. So can you talk about that dynamic, about the dynamic between an industry body, and we've seen how CII functions, we know how FICCI functions and so on, but NASSCOM, especially in the tech field, I think they're the industry body and organization that engages with the government. How does that engagement take place? Can you give us some examples of where it really worked? where they've
So
been able to, yeah.
Yeah, so NASSCOM is probably one such body, but I'm starting to see, many such bodies, right?
Oh,
There's
that's
of
nice.
course,
Okay.
yeah, we're starting to see the e-commerce companies kind of come together with a body. Still early days. So I think I don't know if you've heard of an organization called IVCA.
IVCA.
Yeah, so it's an association of all venture capitalists in the country.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so IVCA is starting to act as an umbrella body now today for a lot of startup-based, aggregating a lot of startup-based concerns and taking them to the government at the national level in many cases. So, and of course, you have ASSOCHAM and some more of these organizations. So in all these cases, they have different councils, and each council may focus on a different area, right? So you could have, even within NASSCOM, there is a council that focuses on startup innovation, on startups. And Chris Gopalakrishna heads the startup thing in. Sorry, Chris heads it in, I think, CI, right? So and in NASSCOM there is one just on labor reforms, right, in this country. There is another a group that just works on the telecom. That's the Telecom Council. So each of these areas now are starting to require specialized policy folks who kind of look at what's changing and what's the need in terms of regulatory evolution in those areas. Now, coming to specific examples, I can very recent examples, right? When the pandemic hit us and we had to change this, the current telecom license policies kind of mandate, if you're an IT or IT enabled service such as a call center or any of these, you got to, the license only permits you to work from wherever the office is located. But with work from home, so this license was no longer valid. So in just a period of 5 days, they had to work with the telecom department to redraft, rework that entire policy to work from to kind of be applicable for a work from home situation. And the government and NASSCOM was able to work in I think it was just like 3 days or 4 days to actually make the required policy changes to enable that. That's one example. Then the other example is the whole Standing Order Act in labor laws, which is a 60-70-year-old law, which is from the industrial era and has very little contextual relevance to technology companies, startups, or any of these. So Karnataka was again one. So again, NASSCOM will look at, some of these are in the domain, they're central statutes, and some of them are state statutes. So, and in many of these areas where there are state statutes, they work with progressive states like Karnataka, Telangana, and so on. And here they were able to get an exemption from the Standing Order Act for the next 5 years till 2024. The IT companies and startups in Karnataka are exempt from the labor laws that are probably not so applicable, and with certain constraints which they need to agree upon. But they are able to get an exemption on a whole class or on a whole act, a labor act. So which is, I think, quite transformative. So I think these are there are many examples which NASSCOM continuously works on.
But how, just give us a sense, like an insider's kind of perspective of how easy or difficult is it to change some of these things? So, probably there are some departments which are a lot more amenable to change and listening, and some which are not. Famously, I think the transport department initially was dead against, because there's also other unions working. It's not just pressure that comes from one side, but there's also, an auto union and some other union, etc., which are, simultaneously putting pressure. So they go and put price caps on, let's say, the how much surge pricing you can do, or so on. Or you take, for example, as you said, the newer things that are coming up with the pharma industry. Again, it's a very touchy topic. I mean, there are ways that things can go wrong. How does that happen? I mean, how easy or difficult is it to move the government? And what does it take? When is it successful also? I mean,
I think the most difficult hurdle is a politically influential lobby. That you can always work towards changing a regulation if there is not too much of an influence from a political angle for the government to deal with, and that could be a large constituent of their support group. It could be, and in many cases, like you said, it may be even a public sector, a part of the economy, right? That could be significantly. I mean, for example, what would really stop the government today from privatizing, bus transport, right? In a state like Karnataka. I think the fact that the public transport system is a reasonably well-run and profitable industry here, and the question would be, if you had private operators compete in this, what would be the dynamics? We don't know, right? How things would change. So there would be a level of discomfort. So you have the political angle, right? And then you have the fact that there are public sector based aspects of the economy that could be hindered. And third, I think there is also a fundamental lack of understanding of why there is this need, right? So that it takes some time for them to kind of recognize the public good or the public demand that is being satisfied by this change or innovation. This is, and in some cases it is very demographic, or what a Gen Z can understand, a millennial cannot understand. What a millennial understands, a baby boomer cannot understand. And some of these are all dynamics which you're expecting somebody in the government to understand, right? It's never easy. So some of these services, and why there is a social need or a social demand for these services to be met and fulfilled in a certain way that is creating a model or a business model that the startups are trying to implement, is not easy to it's not easy for an outsider to understand, and especially if that person is not does not come from a business context. And unfortunately, like I said, that's changing, and some of these departments are getting better and better. So it's all these three areas that one has to navigate and really be good in dealing with.
So I'm just going to pick up on...
so sorry, I'll just say that. So it's almost like you have to come up with a solution,
right,
that satisfies. So it's a multiple constraint problem.
Right.
And how do you engineer a solution that satisfies all these constraints? So the public policy job is really, it's almost like architecting or engineering a solution. So it's unfortunately not the folks who are engineering the technology solution that are really making this work. It's people who are architecting this multidimensional constraint-based solution that will actually get this to work.
Right. I'm going to pick up on a particular thread from your discussion, which is, you talked about, of course, regulators not being right up there when understanding some of these changes that are happening, or even just the understanding the industry landscape and so on. And yet you find them often making policies which will affect them very deeply. So let's take, I mean, one of the well-known things, let's say, called Startup India, right? So when they did something like Startup India, would they hire professionals to help them make that kind of policy which is going to affect the entire startup ecosystem? Or you could take that even Karnataka regulatory sandbox, the innovation sandbox thing that they did. How do they, go about making those policies? Do they consult with outsiders? Do they hire people? And so how does that kind of dynamic work out?
Yeah, so I think that's a good recent trend. These are, you can call, they are usually not-for-profit organizations. They are different from a council like NASSCOM or an industry body, in that all of them are part of this entity, which could be Startup India or something else that the Karnataka government is working on. But so this is a true public-private partnership to work on and engineer solutions proactively. Right? So it's almost like you're trying to envision what's important to accelerate, and a lot of the drivers is economic prosperity of the state, right? Or economic benefits that the state can reap, or the country can reap by being proactive, right? So that's the driver. Now, when that is so these organizations actually are trying to see how do we remain globally competitive, right? That's the fundamental driver in this in this globally kind of flat world, right? So there's this China plus one strategy that is emerging based on what's happening between the US and China. There is a different dynamic that's working between India and Europe. There's a different innovation corridor building between India and Israel. So all these need to be factored in by these kinds of public-private organizations that are getting set up, like Startup India, Invest India, any of these organizations. And they need to look at the current policies, not in sometimes, not just from the framework of what a specific regulatory startup needs, a policy a startup needs, but how do we get more investment into a sector? How do we drive an economic engine in a whole domain that we have some inherent strength in as a state, as a country? So can you vision some of these and look at what kinds of incentives, what kinds of changes can you do, and the whole idea of ease of doing business, right? Can you be more proactive in some of these areas and better the state or the country as a destination, right, to drive more economic change and accelerate economic investments into the state? So that and there, I think there's a lot of policy play, right? So it's more probably economic. It's not of the regulatory kind in a particular department but it's more in terms of overall foreign investments and other areas which are slightly more high level and macro.
Import duties, tariffs,
whole
bunch of
all kinds of cross-border issues, and in some cases IP, IP related areas. What can changes can be made there. So all these and data. I think we didn't speak a lot of that today, but all these data privacy ethics in the whole area of AI and ethics is an area India and Karnataka is trying to become a key influencer in, and I can see a lot of policy folks getting involved in this intersection of AI and ethics.
Probably as a slight aside, if Karnataka showcases a kind of a success story by being more proactive and listening to the industry bodies, actual startups, etc., do you think other states will follow suit? I mean, this is
I mean, in many cases, we have a very healthy competition with many of the states, and I mean, we in Telangana, as in, when I say we, I'm talking as as a person from Karnataka. So we, we enjoy a very healthy competition with Telangana. I think Tamil Nadu, when it comes to industry, always is as or more proactive than our state. The NCR region has a constant now dynamic on which is the innovation hub of the country. Is it Bangalore or the NCR region? So so our joke here is to compete with Bangalore, you got to combine 3 states, which is what NCR is, right? But is Bangalore? But anyway, but the good thing is that there is a lot of good, translation or transform. I mean, translation of a lot of what's happening in one state to what is relevant in another state.
It's fantastic. That's good to hear. I'm just going to take one of the questions from the audience, and this is on basically an educational tech startup. So the question is, what are the ways we can make a SaaS? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
No, it's SaaS. It's SaaS.
Okay. Out of an edtech startup. So I think SaaS is software as a service.
Software as a service,
yeah. So the question is, what are the ways we can make a SaaS out of an edtech startup?
No, say edtech startup can be of 2 kinds, right? So you're familiar with Vedantu, which is one of our companies, and there's Byju's. These are companies that are platforms, but which are what we call as full stack. They not only provide the platform, they also provide the content and the pedagogy and everything that helps you deliver learning digitally to students, right? But then you have SaaS platforms like edX, for example, which let's say I'm an open university in India, or I'm a university in India. I want to start doing my own MOOCs, I can't build that platform from scratch. So then I would buy it from. I would buy the platform and deliver my university courses on top of that, right? And start a new line of service for my university, just like what Takshashila is doing, right? If Takshashila needs a platform which will help you deliver your courses better, you would buy a SaaS platform that enables that. So there are SaaS platforms that work for higher education. There are new SaaS platforms. We believe the entire delivery of education for school children is woefully inadequate in the current platforms. Just because you have Zoom where 10 of us are talking, I don't think this is a great learning platform. Not necessarily, right? Learning is driven by a lot of social interactions. Learning is driven by a lot of dynamics and interplay between teams. A lot of that are not handled by platforms such as Zoom or WebEx or any of these platforms. So there will be a new SaaS platform that may work for K-12 schools. So these are all opportunities in the new, what we call as post-COVID world, right?
Yeah.
The work from home opportunities, the new acceleration of digital innovation, where the current platforms will not suit what is required for a truly remote school education. So there are SaaS platform opportunities.
Right. Actually, I was going to come to exactly that bit about the post-COVID world. Where do you see, how do you see tech and other startups kind of, and we'll probably end with this, evolving with, within this particular situation so education is one space, obviously, which has taken up a lot of innovation and probably requires a little bit of, even government help and so on. Especially, higher education and universities can probably do it a lot quicker than, government schools, which has the highest amount of reach. But that's one area. Where else do you see the most exciting opportunities coming up in this post-COVID world?
I think commerce is going to be big. Changes in commerce. I think there's been a lot of behavioral change in terms of where and what people buy. And I think the intersection of retail, physical commerce, and digital commerce will become even more intertwined. So omni-channel commerce is going to be reality. So I think less and less people will go to stores as comfortably as they've been going to stores physically. But at the same time, I don't think there's going to be a world where there is no physical stores and no physical commerce, right? So this interplay and this intersection is going to get more and more interesting and nuanced. I think the third area is the enterprise tools or platforms that work in premise when somebody is all working in a particular location versus when somebody is distributed and working from anywhere. I think a lot of enterprise tools will, and I know this is slightly technical area that I'm dwelling upon, but your developer tools, your your cloud support and the cyber security tools, anything related to security, all of these will get redefined in the post-COVID world because of the distributed nature of how work will happen. So I'm not taking a biased stance here as that everything will either happen from home or everything will happen, but definitely for the next 2 to 3 years it will be again an hybrid world. So a lot of these tools need to be re-engineered for that world. So there's a big opportunity for technology and innovation to come, and a lot of them will be mobile first,
right,
and not even desktop, right? So, and India being a mobile first world, a mobile first country, I think a lot of startups for them, for these kinds of things will emerge from here in India. So yeah, these are some areas.
Okay, so I slightly lied previously when I said that was the last question, because there is one more, and your good friend Nitin actually wants to put you in the spot, and I thought this is a career webinar, so why not? Do you have any open opportunities right now? Is there, what are the things that you're looking for in terms of hiring? Is there any opportunities, or is there somewhere where people can look out for these opportunities?
Yeah, so I was talking about this body that's coming together in Karnataka state, which will bring together all these key industry bodies, NASSCOM, TIE, and all of them, and the government to help accelerate post-COVID, the post-COVID economy in our state. We have factored in significant leverage of policymakers, and I've already spoken to Nitin. I think Nitin is trying to put me on a spot on that one, and I think that there'll definitely be some opportunities there. Okay. And I think one of the engagement I've not seen, and this is just my 2 cents for Takshashila, is there are a lot of policy folks in Ola, in Flipkart, in Udaan. I have not seen Takshashila engage and bring them and get them to have a better sense for Takshashila. And I think we have done some parts of it, but I think there is room to kind of have them be your spokesperson and kind of create awareness on the talent stream that is coming out of Takshashila.
Right. Fantastic. All right, we'll take that. And so, I mean, for everyone else, when these opportunities open up, Prashant will, I think, share it with us, and we could share it with anyone else who's interested at that point. So thank you so much, Prashant. I think we had agreed that I will let you go at 5:45. So I'm going to stick to my promise. Thank you so much for joining in, and thank you for all your inputs. There are a few other questions, but yeah, unfortunately, I'm not able to get to them at this point.
Sure,
but yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you, and thank you, Soumya. Thank you, Nitin, for giving me this opportunity.
Prashant, that was very enlightening. Thanks, Prashant.
Thanks.
All right, so I'm going to get Soumya Reddy in, and we're going to, again, I'm going to start the way I started with this thing about and give a brief kind of overview and bio of Soumya. So I think many of you would already know this, obviously, but still, Soumya Reddy is an Indian politician from Karnataka, from Bangalore probably, and a member of Indian National Congress. She was elected as a member of the Legislative Assembly of Karnataka from Jayanagar in 2018. Soumya has, of course, a very rich experience of working in not just politics, but also grassroots activism. She does research and training, community mobilization, animal welfare. I think she's part of quite a few animal welfare, environmental protection, and of course, policy advocacy. Soumya has bachelor's in chemical engineering and master's in environmental technology, I think from New York, if I'm not mistaken, Soumya. So, Soumya, welcome again, and thanks for joining in.
Thank you so much, Anupam. Thanks so much, Takshashila. It was a very enlightening conversation with Prashant. Being technologically challenged most of the time myself.
Yeah. So again, tell us about your kind of briefly, just to set the context for our listeners. Tell us about your political journey. I mean, how it's been, and what are the highlights, if you please. So I'm basically giving a platform for a politician to talk about her work. So there you go.
So you're basically telling a politician to talk.
Yeah.
No joke. But now, well, thanks for the kind information. Introduction. And like you rightly said, I actually come from a tech background. I have a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, have a master's degree in environmental engineering. But I actually grew up working as an activist in childhood. And so, yeah, in the sense, I started off when I was in college, school, and right from organizing protests to, ground level community campaigns to working on policy, implementing.
So you've been a troublemaker from the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
So yeah, long story short, I was also working as a researcher, went and got my master's degree on environmental technology, energy management. I was in fact crunching numbers on environmental impact assessment, sitting in the middle of Baramati. But then I just realized, well, somebody has to do this, but not me. Well, that's because I realized that in our country, we have very good laws. And also we have some very good policies as well. But the issue is actually with implementation. And so that's when I decided to, and of course, politicians, it's a very lucrative field. Everyone loves jumping into it. And no, well, you know how it is. I kind of call it jokingly, it's like a cesspool. And I used to be one of those people as well. Oh my God. It's so difficult to maneuver, whatnot, get things done. In fact, I still very vividly remember we had drafted this very interesting draft on environment in, I think, the impact of the water and chemicals in the poultry sector. And then that draft went and sat on the desk of a special secretary. I realized either it's going to sit on the desk or it's going to go to the bin. And it applies to both bureaucrats and politicians. So that's when I decided to jump into electoral politics.
Right. Okay, that's fascinating. And so you got elected in 2018 from Jayanagar?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to break the format a little bit and shake things up. And in fact, I'm going to start with a couple of audience questions, if you don't mind.
I also want it to be as interactive as possible.
Yeah.
Because, I was, like we spoke earlier, I was wondering what to speak because I hope this is useful to them. And I'm also, new into politics, and I'm kind of jack of all, master of none sometimes. And so let's, and I think public policy is something that's extremely interesting. I want, people who are a part of this to benefit from it. So yeah.
So ask questions, put her in the spot, but be nice. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm going to start with a question by a participant called Tushar. And he says, how do government representatives, and we kind of spoke about this earlier in our conversation. So the question is, how do government representatives perceive the need for support in public policy? So when you are out and about doing your work, do you feel this need to get support in terms of understanding policies better? Do you feel the need to consult with, let's say, policy representatives or professionals and get a better sense? So I'm going to start with that question, and then I have my own questions lined up after that.
Well, that's a very there's a very long answer to it, but let me just put it this way. I mean, as a I'm a representative. I'm a legislative. Member of legislative assembly. So there are different. I mean, I don't want to do a civics lesson right now, but there are members of parliament, and there are representative at a municipality. What I want to say is, yes, absolutely, there is a need, and I think everything has to be bottom up, ground up, and we have this wonderful system in our country where we also have something called as ward committees, and in fact we're supposed to implement it, have meetings, take suggestions, and it has to come from the ground up. They're supposed to do a meeting once a month, and then legislators are supposed to legislate, but unfortunately MLAs, mostly 90% of the work that I do is actually the work of a corporator. Anyway, jokes apart, what I want to say is, yes, absolutely. I mean, I'll just go back a little bit towards during and before my elections. And for me, one of the reasons why I got into electoral politics is because I think there has to be, it's all about making the right connect. And it's all about implementing, because like you see, why is that people are so disconnected with, it could be the government, could be a public policy, but things are changing to a certain degree. So what I did was actually did a survey in my own constituency. So what is the need out there? And it could be related to women empowerment, it could be roads, infrastructure, parks, could be jobs, I don't know, skill development, and of course education. But the most important thing is making sure there is participative governance. And I think at every level there has to be engagement from people and we really need to move with the times as well. And like in fact Prashant said, it's, I mean, sandbox, I don't want to talk about it in detail. That is something that was extremely innovative, because when we look at the laws right now, there is a huge lacuna. For example, the app-based aggregators had a huge issue when because it is so archaic, the laws sometimes.
Yeah.
And so in fact, when our government, the Congress government, was in power with Mr. Siddaramaiah as the chief minister and Mr. Prashant Prakash as the ITBT minister, in fact, this was the first time when we actually spoke about it. In fact, I also worked very closely with you must have heard of Elevate 100, and also it was, in fact, we had the India's largest state-sponsored incubation program. And so I know if I'm answering the question. So yeah, okay.
No, you're getting there. No, so and kind of a related question is, spoke about the need for support in public policy. The second and extremely related question is the availability of support. How much of it do you actually get? Who do you actually reach out to if you need help in kind of these policy matters where you have to, let's say, take a stand on a few issues when you're doing legislative work, for example? How do you consult? Who do you consult? How do you go about that process?
I will give you a small example of practicality. So for example, there is in my constituency, actually, they wanted to make all of you have heard of Tender Shore. So the Tender Shore roads. So as soon as I won, in fact, a bunch of authorities came and, they said, listen, we have made one side of the Stender Shore road already, and we need to do the other side. We need to chop down, blah, 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 so many trees. And for me, personally speaking, yes, of course we need it. But then what was then, if you actually look at it, the entire other stretch of the street was completely barren because all the trees were chopped down. And so I actually spoke to a bunch of different people, and including experts related to Tender Shore, like Mr. Ravi Chandar and many others. And I think we need to look at that. And then I engaged, brought them in, and then we actually had a look. We had a look at how is it that we could actually save trees and ensure that also do the work as much as possible. And the same thing applies even to metro right now. So they're going to chop down a lot of trees. And I think it's also, it's like, what is it, and the key is about public engagement. And there are so many alternatives out there. There are so many solutions out there. And I think interacting with people and ensuring that this is really the need, rather than kind of doing a top down kind of and I can go on with similar examples with related to BMRCL chopping down trees in Banargata Road, to even the Hubli Ankola railway project. So collaborating, so either looking at solutions, taking solutions, and then sometimes it doesn't really work. So
Yeah.
I don't know, you go the legal way.
Right. So I'm going to jump right in, right? Let's say if one of our policy graduates who've done Takshashila's GCPP course or the PGP course, etc., or someone who's done studied public policy, and they want to work in the political realm, so not really stand for elections, but help in terms of public policy, how can they actually end up working with a politician? So it could be, and you could tell me at different levels, it could be at whatever MP, so whether it's an MP having a policy team, or of course at the state level, or even at the local level. So how would that pan out? If I wanted to really work with a politician, how would I go about doing it?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that question, is because I think the key is there are so many opportunities right now, frankly speaking, not just with politicians or in politics. Be it with working with politicians, be it with working with bureaucrats, and it could be political think tanks, policy think tanks, it could be community level engagement. And I can just go on and on and on. It doesn't necessarily have to be framing legislations. It doesn't really have to be at a very macro level, but also even including things like there are so many new opportunities right now with implementation on the ground, to even behavioral change. And I think really this is the new workforce out there that a lot of people are not really talking about. I particularly am very excited about it because I've also, I've studied also, a little bit of this during when I was doing my master's. And also, I am also a B-Clip graduate as well. I did the third batch. Yeah. And so I worked very closely with, in fact, Takshashila. So I am a Takshashila product, you can see that. And so
one of our great success stories. Yeah.
So yeah, so going back to your question, I think engaging with public policy experts, graduates, I think is really the way to go with all of these different fields, that I actually spoke about. I personally, yes, of course, I'm constantly looking for people to engage, because all the different topics that I spoke about, be it environment, be it healthcare, be it skill development, be it education, and I think at every level, be it at an MP level. I'm sure Mr. Shashi Tharoor, in fact, works very closely with a lot of people. I've met a lot of people myself who have worked with him. And of course, Rajiv Goda sir as well. Um, I've known, in fact, Rajiv Goda sir for years, who's constantly kind of guiding us with all of these things. And I think even at an MLA level as well. And I think, I mean, imagine if each and every representative starts doing work. What unfortunately we tend to do is we tend to work reactively,
Right.
and not proactively.
Right.
And I think I mean, each and every one of us, I mean, I think every couple of months I keep looking back at my manifesto. I mean, I would request a lot of you to actually like go through my website and have a look at my manifesto, and give me your inputs. So I'm constantly looking at, am I working towards that?
Right.
And so constantly taking inputs, because in fact I made my manifesto also taking inputs, did a survey during my before my elections. What is the need out there? I mean, because I think at the end of the day, it's not just roti kapda makan that we're also thinking about, talking about, right? It's about quality of life, and it's about a lot of different things. I mean, it was extremely um, interesting, all the different things that Prashant spoke about, because I think that's really the way to go. Especially right now, considering we're in the post-COVID world, we also need to move towards post-COVID economy, considering what's really happening with jobs, with businesses, with our economy right now. And I think um, I think we really need to get as innovative as possible.
Right.
If you want me to talk about anything specific, free to ask me, so I can.
Yeah.
I don't
So just a couple of things. I mean, you mentioned two MPs who are hiring directly and who have let's say a research team who help them with from framing questions in Parliament to thinking about policy issues and so on. But two seems like a very small number. Are there more people out there who are hiring and having research? Huh?
I'm sure there are. I mean, I mean, these are the ones that I actually have engaged, but I'm sure there are many of them. And I mean, I'm constantly also like taking inputs and working. I mean, in fact, many of the Takshashila, your colleagues, I'm talking to them. In fact, I'm actively also engaged with BPAC and many of my batchmates. I think there are so many experts out there. And Bangalore, I personally feel very lucky because we have so many experts, and we have a very brilliant civil society, where, I mean, be it I'll just give you a small example of solid waste management and environment. There are so many things. I mean, just in the past couple of years, we didn't have garbage was a huge issue, until a few years ago. And so, I mean, we didn't even know about segregation. We didn't even think about it. But now all of us are segregating.
Right.
And there's been a lot of work that's gone on the background very closely. And why I'm talking about this is because and then we came up, the previous government also came up with a very nice plastic ban as well. And why I said this is because there were so many innovations. There were so many people getting involved with behavioral change. There was, I mean, there's something called as a solid waste management roundtable. There are so many people who became civic leaders who are actually working with implementing this, getting new technology out there. And so it's something, it's at the end of the day, you're implementing it on the ground. It is also something what the government needs, and also ensuring that everyone is on the same page. I think that's the key word. That's the way to go. Because even if, I mean, imagine the government, imagine if people, that's the citizens, and the bureaucrats, administration is not on the same page.
Right.
It doesn't work, does it? So unless and of course, we need, the biggest stakeholder is also, I mean, NGOs, if the experts like I don't know, policy experts. There are people who are interested. There are that resident welfare associations, whatnot. And I think if everyone comes on the same page, um, we can work wonders. And I think even right now, past couple of months during COVID, I think Bangalore also has been extremely, even though cases are unfortunately increasing past, I would say, 3 to 4 days. We really complied, and everyone really worked on the ground.
Right.
I mean, including cops, the administration, people like us, and everyone really kind of did what they had to do. And I mean, I'll give you my own example. We had just about 9 cases in Jayanagar, and these were people who came from abroad, and we ensured that it didn't spread. And for 5 weeks, we didn't have a single new case.
Right.
And then of course, then there was a people came from other states, and then now it's spreading. Why is that? Is because everyone. I mean, it's about everyone really needs to be on the same page.
Right. I'm gonna come back to that thing about working with politicians and so on. So hypothetically, and I'm not putting you on the spot, but hypothetically, let's say if you were to, and you have previously again reached out and said that you wanted to hire, but so if you were to hire policy professionals as part of your team, what would be the kind of things that you're looking out for? What would be from, of course, qualifications, but more importantly, skills and qualities that you would be looking out for? That is a serious question. Now, there is, of course, someone else who's lightheartedly said whether you would employ someone from a opposing ideology, but we'll get to that later. That's a joke. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's I mean, the thing is, I end up, like I said earlier, I end up getting spending most of my time on the reactionary things.
Right.
Like, namane munde kasa ide kasa tegibeku.
Right. Yeah.
Chamber kattide.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, my phone is constantly ringing,
Yeah.
and I can't say no. It's not my job. It's the corporators' work. It's the BBMP's work. They goddamn elected me, so you better do my work. Is what they're going to say. But unfortunately, but I need somebody to actually work on all the things that I want to work on proactively. For example, I'll just give you one example of mobility, transport sector. My dream is to actually make, for example, I mean, not just Jayanagar, but also Bangalore, walkable, cyclable, and busable. And I think if we move towards, in fact, like sustainable means of transportation, and I think all of us need to also kind of transition with this post-COVID world. And so having said that, so there are a bunch of different things that I'm working on. It could be education, working with government schools, ensuring that they are at par, if not better than the private ones. In fact, I've gone to other states and I checked out, including even the Delhi schools as well. And of course, even I think jobs, skill development is something that I'm also working on. A lot of people, especially youth, have lost jobs in the past couple of months.
Right.
And so, in fact, even MSMEs are extremely affected. And I can just go on. So there are different umbrellas as well. So there are, yeah, I mean, I am looking at people who are going to kind of handhold, coordinate with all of these different things. And I mean, there are about probably 10 different things. You can feel free to have a look at my manifesto.
Right.
And so that we could, I don't know, continue to work on all of that.
Yeah, I think that's probably a sad reality in India, which we've talked about before, that pretty much every elected representative is working at one level below them. A member of parliament is actually doing state level work, an MLA is doing a corporator's work, and so on and so forth. I think, they often get inundated by the routine work, and you don't have enough kind of free space to think about the big picture issues, and probably meeting some of the goals and targets that you set for yourself. I think, but yeah, that's a
Because day before yesterday, I mean, it rained badly, and I was on Bannerghatta Road, which was completely flooded.
I
And then
know it's right here.
yeah, exactly. And I speak to BWSSB, I speak to BBMP, and then I speak to stormwater drain, and then I finally speak to. So these guys say, "Illa, madam, namdala idu BWSSB now kelsa ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ." And then those guys say, BBMP guys say, "No, no, no, not the road." And then the stormwater drain guys say, "Now ಮುಗಿಸಿದೀವಿ, desilting ಮಾತ್ರ ಬಾಕಿ ಇದೆ, metro kelsa." When I speak to metro, they're like, "Madam, 3 ತಿಂಗಳಿಂದ staff ಇಲ್ಲ."
Oh, right. Yeah,
When you
it's
talk about, I think it's about. I mean, I mean, hand holding and ensuring that work gets done. So there are so many different things. Like I don't know, like could be the Jayadeva flyover, it could be the metro, it could be roads. So, but also I really want to work on all of these things that I mentioned earlier, is because I think the key is also quality of life, and it's not just about these basic things. I think people also expect um representatives to, I don't know, help them with that, or at least I want to.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to move on into this other space, which is political consultation. And now, while political consulting or people, who run campaigns, etc., is not new, it's always been there. I think there might be a professionalization of that service in the last, let's say, I don't know, few years maybe, where you're having big organizations which are coming up, which will run the campaign professionally, who will even do, minute ward level analysis to bigger picture stuff, and do consultation, get feedback from people, help in writing manifestos, probably help in writing election speeches, a whole bunch of things. So can you give us your sense of that? Have you worked with any of them, or do you know what kind of work that will entail, and how do you get into that field and so on?
Yeah. Yes, yes, and yes. I think it's not just at a MLA level, and I think it's very important. I mean, some people are utilizing political consultants already. It could be at a government, I mean, party level. Some people have at, as an elected representative, I don't know, as an MP, as an MLA, during elections, before elections, and I did as well. I mean, I spoke to a lot of experts, like I said earlier, and I did take suggestions, not just from experts. So they did help me even with booth level analysis. I think data is something that's really important that a lot of politicians don't talk about or don't utilize, because it's like, I mean, each and every place you could actually kind of, even if it's just one booth,
Right.
how many people are there, and what are the issues over there, and what's the demographics, and what are the issues, and so you could just kind of categorize them into so many different things. So yeah, I mean, I did I mean, I did consult. I did, I mean, a lot of people did in fact like help me with it, including of course Takshashila, and I mean, I can name a lot of them: Avinash Gowda, Naman, Srivatsa, Deepak, many of them. I mean,
Yeah.
I want to just name a few of them, but yeah, and I constantly do. So I talk to them, meet them at least once a month, twice a month, take inputs on a day-to-day, I mean, what's happening and how to move forward and stuff like that. And of course, you could go on to even things like, I remember meeting this one person who was a political consultant who wanted to charge me about 50 lakhs.
Right.
And one lady talks about image management for about 20 minutes. We have to change your image.
Right.
Jokes apart, yeah.
So, but that industry is growing, right? I mean, it's
Absolutely. But I think the key is to connect, to do as much research as possible. There are so many people who have experience in this already, so to probably work with them. In fact, my party, Congress is also constantly engaging with people. We are also particularly excited since Mr. DK Shivkumar sir has also become the president. So we're also looking at engaging uh, uh, at different levels with youth, with women, on different issues as well.
Right. And so when it comes to, and this is also a question from one of the participants called Smita, we're talking about, related is the process of writing a manifesto when you're getting out there. How much research actually goes into writing a manifesto? Now, there are a few probably agenda items which, your party has is traditionally kind of associated with and would like to, for that to continue. But there are also new policy issues coming up. So, and when that goes into the manifesto, let's say probably at the union level and sometimes at the state level as well. So, for example, if you have to take a stand on the policy on tech startups, for example, that's a new thing. And what kind of research goes into it? And again, is there consultations done, wide-ranging consultations done, etc.?
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing it up. And that's a very good question. I just spoke about what I did when during my elections, but also want to just talk about during the Lok Sabha elections, we did, Professor Rajiv Gaurav actually did a very, very, very extensive, I don't know how many different topics, 23 different topics in thousands of different places, cities, small towns, where, be it technology, startups, we had environment, women, education. I was a part of probably about 4 of them, all of these. And I think, so we had, so we engaged with different people who are working on all of these different topics, stakeholders, practitioners. For example, education. So we engage with people at different levels, people who are running schools, people who are teachers, people who are, I don't know, students. And so we actually took, inputs from different levels, and also they could also give suggestions through email, everything. And then there was in fact, I think everybody should have a look at the manifesto, a Congress manifesto. It was an extremely comprehensive process, and I think it was probably the highlight of the entire campaign. And and I think, going back to your question, so there is obviously a manifesto at a party level. And the party obviously creates a manifesto based on the principles and ideals of the party. And I think, and there was a huge laundry list of things and topics that we actually addressed. I mean, I don't want to go into the details. It's available online. Do look it up. Yeah.
Right. So if we're nearing the kind of close of it. So I just want to, ask if let's say a policy professional, right, without entering into electoral politics, so without actually, let's say, standing for elections, but in this broad area that we call politics, what would be the most exciting opportunities to look out for? If anything comes to the top of your head.
See, there are so many people actually willing to actually engage with experts. And also, be it, like I said earlier, there are so many different opportunities within the government. It could be at working with elected representatives. It could also be working with, I don't know, even with bureaucrats. So it all depends on their level of interest, their priorities. And I think also there are so many startups out there. There are so many non-profit organizations as well. And and I think, so I can just go on about basically how there is really a need where we could bridge the gap, between all the different pillars of the government, to implementing the law, to getting solutions, to, I don't know, behavioral change. And I mean, each and every different topic, be it education, be it, I don't know, creating jobs. There are so many different things. And I think, so there are definitely opportunities because, like I rightly said, I mean, why would you, um, I mean, if I wasn't an elected representative right now, I would probably be, I don't know, doing their job. So yeah, I think the key is people are also, I mean, especially in cities, and also governments are looking for people, looking for also fresh graduates, people with experience, uh, to do research, to engage with people, to engage with what's the need out there. And yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just another, just quick thought from you, and we'll probably end it after that. Lateral entry into government. Do you see that increasing over time? Do you see that as an opportunity at all? Because I mean, we've probably seen a lot of talk, a little bit of action where, you know, at least 2 or 3 people were gotten into Niti Aayog, for example. But do you see that happening firstly at the union government level? And if at all, can we think of this happening at the state level? So people who are not really into going through the IAS route, but who can still obviously contribute a lot to the government and policy making process.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's a good idea, and a lot of people are doing it already. I mean, like I said earlier, even with the previous government, we did kind of engage with a lot of people, especially the younger. I mean, elected representatives have been engaging with them, and even people who are really working with innovation. Even when my father was also a transport minister, we also did speak to a lot of experts and everything. And lateral entry, yeah, like for example, I can also give you an example of, I don't know, at the government level, probably education. For example, Atishi, I mean, she did a wonderful job, in fact, with education. And I think we really need to encourage that. And hopefully that happens at every level, state and the center as well.
Right. Okay. So I think, yeah, this is probably a good time to end. So thank you so much, Samya, for joining in and giving us a glimpse of what it is to be in the political field at this point of time. And I'm sure, you know, there's a lot of challenges for you coming up. So in this COVID world, it requires a lot of, from, you know, grassroots kind of work to also thinking about some of the big things of how it's going to change Bangalore, how it's going to change Karnataka, and what does it all of this mean. So, but so I even more so, I appreciate the fact that you've taken out time and joined us for this conversation. So thank you so much. Everyone else, thank you again for joining in on a Saturday evening, and it's nearly 6:30. So we're going to let you go now. If you have any questions or thoughts or comments about any of the things that we spoke about, you can always email contact@takshila.org.in. Also do, of course, at the end of it, I'm going to do a little bit of promotion. Do join or at least look at our courses or various courses that we offer, both 3-month graduate certificate programs and year-long postgraduate program. We also have BClip. You can look at that. Soumya is an alumna of BClip program. So yeah, do visit us this thing. We've also been doing a lot of work on COVID. You can also check that out on our website. So thank you so much for joining in, and have a wonderful weekend ahead.
For this wonderful I don't know, a talk. I really want to thank all of you for joining as well. Thanks, Soumya. Thanks, Takshashila. Feel free to connect with me, give me suggestions. And I think stay safe, because the next couple of months, unfortunately, is going to be a little scary. But let's continue to do what we have to do to work to ensure that we have a better world.
Thank you so much. That's a wonderful positive note to end this on. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.